Electric Jam Podcast.
Hi, this is Christopher and Richard from electricjam.com. Our site is all about guitars, recording, and gear, all from a rock and metal perspective. I've been in the music industry since the early 2000s and have worked in studios all across the country. Spent a long time touring, playing shows, several bands and projects. I teach guitar and audio production lessons, and through our site, we also teach these things. Richard, what about you?
Oh, well, I'm kind of a journalist by trade, as explained in the last one. I'm not as technically proficient or knowledgeable as you, but we set up the site together because my background's in kind of journalism and, online media, but we shared a, passion for guitars and metal and gear and stuff like that. So that's how I got going. So I'm kind of like the learner. So I know a bit. I probably know more than the average guy, but I don't know as much as Chris. So it's kind of, the dynamic is quite useful in this because I'm here to ask the stupid questions that people don't know, and Chris can explain things to me, and then you can, sort of helps the learning process along and hopefully makes the podcast a bit more interesting. And you get something more out of it as well, because you don't have to be an expert to listen to it and understand what we're talking about. Because there's nothing worse than when you listen to a podcast and it's two people that know, a subject completely inside out. Yeah, and then jargon, and you don't really know kind of what's going on. So it's nice to have someone in there like me to just go, well, what does that do? And, sort of dumb it down a little bit for everybody.
So Richard's learning with all of y'all at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, always learning. Never too old to learn.
Yeah, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about is studios are ditching like full stacks and tube amps, and they seem to be going for amp sims and digital stuff like the Helix. I mean, like even big studios are doing this, and
so I
think we both have a little bit of experience with that. You were just talking before we started about the Mustang Micro and how products like that seems to be going in that direction. But the thing about that is it's not as good as something like the Helix or the head rush pedals or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to spend like a great deal of money on something for it to sound as good as a traditional kind of, guitar rig, tube amp setup kind of thing. But my kind of problem with it is that there's sort of quite a bit lost in the sound that you get from digital versus analog. I mean, I'm not like a massive stickler for like, you've got to use this and you've got to use that or else it's not right. But, when big studios that have the resources to have these kind of like classic, iconic amps and stuff, and they're just going, no, we're just not going to use them anymore. We're just going to use this instead. It's easier. Like stuff, like nuances is going to get lost. And a lot of stuff recently, like a lot of albums that I listen to and a lot of bands I like, I just think the new records, while they sound more polished and a little tighter, they kind of don't have that same kind of punch, the same kind of aggression that is present on their older stuff. And I don't know for certain, but my kind of like the new Mastodon album is a really good example of this. Like sonically, and the songs and the composition are really good, but I don't know, it just sounds quite flat to me when you compare it to kind of like Leviathan or even like Blood Mountain. It doesn't have that kind of dirtiness to it, that like sort of organic, sort of aggressive kind of something you can't really put your finger on, but it's almost like space. There's like a heaviness to it, like a width to the sound that I don't know if it's just me, but I can't really hear that on their newer stuff. It's too tight almost. The sound is too overproduced, and I know that they do use a lot of they switched, didn't they? Because Bill's a big proponent of digital stuff.
I think that last album was kind of a mix between the two. I think they did a little bit of real amps, but then a lot of it, they do have their own signature plugin through STL Tones, I think. I think Bill does, at least. But yeah, if you go back, like I was listening to Crack the Sky the other day.
Yeah.
And like that album's just a masterpiece for me. And compared to the newer one, it does sound kind of flat. And the thing about that is I don't want to be a boomer and be like, a Les Paul and a Marshall stack is all you need. But that does seem to make a big difference. I mean, I think a lot of metal bands today sound the same. And I think that the reason that they sound the same is because they're all using the same presets.
Yeah, and also I think there's things are a lot more clinical now than they used to be. Like it's a lot easier to clean things up and tidy things up.
Everything is to a click track, Everything is right on the grid. It's almost too perfect. Like I don't mind like a polished album. Like I love Def Leppard, for instance, and that's like some of the most polished music in the world, but it still has some feel to it because that was people playing instruments,
Yeah, and you hear that in the room. If you listen to take for instance Dope Smoker by Sleep, right? This is like a 60-minute guitar riff effectively for the main song. And there's the story behind that is that when they were recording it, the room that they recorded it in and the actual amp stack they used and the heads and everything was kind of all complicit in the overall sound. If they went and tried to do it again in a different room, it wouldn't sound the same because it was the acoustics of the room, it was the amp itself, it was the weather. They all kind of contributed to this ridiculous, huge, organic, monstrous wall of sound that they got that became that is what that entire album's about. It's just one big exercising guitar tone just over and over again for an hour and a half. And that's the sort of thing to me. It's I like that kind of stuff, the kind of story behind how something was captured, and that you couldn't just go and do that anywhere. It had to be special circumstances surrounding it or certain nuances that were used when they were kind of micing it up and putting it together. And I don't know, I suppose it's one of those things now. It's with AI that's coming out and stuff, it's much easier to do a lot of things now. So there's more people doing more stuff, but then it kind of takes away a lot of the art that goes into making art, because the actual art itself is the process, and the process is usually, I have to learn how to use this amp, I have to learn how to dial the settings in, I have to learn how to do this, I have to learn how to do that, and then you have to tinker with it, and through that tinkering and just dialing in stuff and messing around with things and then learning from other people and physically moving stuff around, you start to go, oh right, and you start to understand the different levels of tone and acoustic profiles and stuff. Whereas if you just sat on a laptop just moving your mouse around and going, oh yeah, that sounds a bit better, it's just I don't know, it's weird.
That sounds okay.
It is kind of an old person thing to say.
No, I mean,
but I do think there is something, it'd be like if, I don't know, I'm trying to think of it, Mr. Gill, who's I don't know if you know him, he's a painter. And he paints these really intricate, detailed, it's almost of cities, but a whole cityscape with little teeny people everywhere. And it's all hand painted, and each individual, kind of a Where's Wally or Where's Waldo.
It looks like a photograph.
No, it doesn't look like a photograph.
photorealistic.
But he takes ages to do it. But he could probably just shit one of them out using Dali, and it'd just be done. But it wouldn't be as good. Well, it probably would look as good, but it wouldn't be as good because it wouldn't be his sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that's a bit disappointing that they're using amp sim. So I suppose it's in a way it's all about cost, isn't it? So if it's cheaper, long run.
I mean, yeah, because time is money, especially in the studio. I mean, if you're working with a tight budget and it takes 5 minutes to dial in a tone, or 5 minutes because you already have a tone saved on a Helix or on STL Tones or, Positive Grid, any of those. I mean, yeah. I mean, it it only takes a few seconds to get that up and running and get it done. Now, where I think that that's a good thing is when you're doing the demos for an album, you know? Because you can just lay down stuff really quick. You can do it to a click track, and then everybody else can kind of come up with their own parts. And that's where it's kind of good, you know? But, I mean, yeah, there's sort of a lost art going on there. Excuse me. You know, like someone like Eddie Van Halen, who sat around for hours and hours dialing in his amp and dialing in his pickups and his guitar, you know, and he still has a tone that no one can replicate. People try to replicate it all the time. Steve has a sound that no one can replicate because half of it is the way that he plays, but the other half is, you know, all of his gear and the stuff that he uses and his distortion pedal that he made 30 years ago and he still uses it, you know? And I think that is kind of a lost art, you know, at the sake of sounding like
parts,
boomers.
isn't it? It's kind of like, it's like the sum of all the parts come together to make a unique sound. And I think that's the kind of thing that gets lost a lot of the time with when things become automated too much. You kind of like, you know, it's like AI now, like AI can write stories, it can, you know, it's weird. It's kind of on a precipice. And we've always had like things like Pro Tools for a long time and things like that. So music's always has been going through a process of becoming more refined and more formulaic for a long time, which is fine.
100%. Mm-hmm.
But it's when it's reaching the next phase, which is where, you know, things like, I mean, I have no idea what you'll be able to do with AI tools with music. I mean, the sky's kind of the limit with that kind of stuff, but it's just an odd thing because it's I mean, as much as I like amp sims and I use them and stuff, it'd be really sad when, you know, like metal albums aren't. I mean, you've worked in like a big studio and like LA, you know, like kind of how they work, so the workflow and stuff like that. And I suppose they want a certain, when you do an album, if it's a big album, say a big metal band or like a new Metallica album, which is probably the less said about the last one, the better, really. But do they sort of strive? Yeah, you're gonna like strive for continuity across all the tracks. Like you want the guitars to sound the same, or you want to build a bit of change, and it's one of those weird things where I just a lot of the time, like I remember like in the early, like 10, 15 years ago, like new albums used to come out all the time. You'd be like, whoa, this sounds amazing, and it's like. And now it's like there's new music all the time, and it comes out, and sonically it's all just kind of like. And I don't know if it's a lethal combination of Spotify audio being crap and everything sounding very similar,
being
like say using the same plugins. It's like a sort of an unholy alliance of things that are kind of culminating together to sort of make music not sound as good as it used to. So I don't know, but yeah, it is odd, and it is. But then you have bands like Meshuggah, and they've been using, you know, amp sims for forever.
Before it was a thing.
Yeah, they were like going.
I mean, they were using them in the late 90s.
Yeah, like plugging straight into the PA.
They were using Line 6 stuff.
Yeah, straight into the PA. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, and that's another way to look at this stuff. Like, if you're using a Helix or an Axe Effects or something like that for a live show, I 100% understand why. Yeah. Because traveling with an amplifier, I mean, that's more luggage. If I were to go play a tour in England, for example, I would have to rent all of my gear because I can't ship my amp every time I want to go play a show over there. You know, and that's what bands used to have to do. They would have to rent gear once they showed up in another country. But now you can just bring your Axe Effects, and it's easy. Yeah. Plug it into the sound system. Done. But everything's so loud.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. What about the rental companies?
Yeah. What about those guys?
But everything's so loud. You know, everything's so loud at a concert. It doesn't really matter. I mean, Metallica's been using Axe Effects for 10 years now, and no one noticed.
No.
Now in the studio, they use their Mesa Boogies and, you know, whatever they're into right now. But yeah, there is something kind of lost on that. And going through like the Spotify top 20 metal, you kind of hear a lot of bands that sound very, very much the same. And it's not just guitars. It's drum samples and stuff too. Like I think I've heard the same snare sample on 5 or 6 different bands, listening to the Spotify top 10 hard rock and metal.
No
and
way.
it's like, come on, guys. Yeah, same
that's what I
snare
mean when it
sample,
becomes, 'cause it's
same
too easy.
clicky bass drum. It's too easy to copy and paste it, 100%. But then do you have the time to sit in there with a microphone, putting it up next to the guitar speaker and being like, does that sound good? And then the engineer's like, no, move it over an inch. Then it's like, does that sound good? No, move it back. You know, that it takes like an hour to set up a guitar rig. It takes even longer to set up drums. So I can understand why they're using some of that stuff. But I mean, it does get to the point of where it's automated. And
well, that's the thing. It becomes too commodified.
I think for recording, maybe let's stick to real gear for recording. Live, I don't think it matters live because it's loud. No one cares. But
no, and
you know,
live
for the
recording
studio,
sound so much better to me. I mean, you listen to like the first. I mean, I don't know if you like Arcade Fire, but you listen to like their first album, Funeral, and that's kind of all recorded live in like a big church. You know, using like old school tape and, you know, mics that are probably like 60 years old. And it sounds ridiculous. It just sounds so good. And when it came out, it was just like, whoa. It was just, I mean, they're not even a remotely heavy band, but that album is one of my favorite albums of all time just because it sounds so good and the songs are so good. But it's mainly because of how it sounds. It sounds huge. And there's lots
they have the choir going in
strings,
the church.
they have like, you know,
doing the la-las and the ahs in the background, and it sounds so huge. You're right, because it has actual reverb. They the church that they did that in had like 20-foot ceilings or something like that, so the reverb was mostly natural for all of that.
Like,
and you're right,
Michael
it does sound good.
Yeah, well, Michael Stipe always used to record his vocals in the stairwell of the recording studio on REM records because it was the reverb in there was the natural reverb because obviously it's a stairwell like 4 or 5 stories high was, you know, awesome rather than just using like
it's
natural effect.
It's like the drums on In Utero. You know, Steve Albini, I think he put Dave Grohl's kit in the hallway of Pachyderm Studios.
Yeah.
And they were like, man, that sounds awesome. Let's do that. Now I go back and listen to that album, and yeah, Dave Grohl's drums sound huge on that album.
That's never going to happen anymore, is it?
Almost sound like John Bonham.
Yeah, now you can just play an electric drum kit and put the samples in, and it's all good.
You know,
get the hallway plug in.
As much as Periphery is kind of at fault for a lot of this, like I'm not blaming them solely, but you know, they were one of the first bands to be a band literally out of a bedroom. Like they didn't have a studio recording. Like they all recorded everything right there in Misha's bedroom.
Yeah, which is really cool. I mean, that to make a record that sounds that good as well, doing that as well, is really commendable and kind of testament to how talented those guys are.
Oh yeah, 100%. But now their new album, they recorded everything live. So they recorded the drums in a really cool drum room. They used amplifiers. They used each other's guitars and basses when they were recording everything. So it's kind of funny that they kind of started all of that, all of this digital automation, everything being to a click. They started that, but now they've even abandoned it. And I think that the new album that we reviewed on Electric Jam, actually, about a week before it came out, I think that album sounds better than any of their other albums because it's real.
Yeah. You can't fake stuff. It's like films. Like I always have this conversation with my good friends when we go to the pub and we talk about like how modern films are just they don't have the same impact as kind of like films from like the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s because the reliance on visual effects is just so much now that once you've seen, you know, an entire planet explode and everybody eviscerated on it with like, you know, huge walls of toxic, you know, rays or whatever the hell they use in superhero films.
Spaceships and
it just you know, exploding battalion ships with 200,000 people on it. You just kind of like, oh well, you know, it's the kind of the reality's lost. Whereas you go back and watch, you know, something before, like Alien is always the example everyone uses, but even something like Blade Runner, where it's practical effects, you know, it's because it's real and it's shot real.
The Thing.
You know it's real.
By John Carpenter.
Yeah, The Thing is probably one of the best films ever made, and it just, the atmosphere, everything just works better because you know it's real, and the suspension of disbelief is held more firmly in place than whereas you just know, you see a modern film, everything's just green screen and explosions and crazy, vistas and stuff. It's just there's no magic in it. It's just gone. You can sort of feel the kind of fakeness, and it kind of permeates every bit of the screen. And yeah, it just kind of sucks. And it's not, I'm not saying that happens with music the same way, but
it's getting there.
Yeah, real is better. Real is always better. Like a real painting is always going to be better than some AI painting. Like real drums sound better than programmed drums, like they just do. And or like an electronic kit made to sound like a real kit. But the periphery thing is quite interesting because I'm not particularly into them at all. I think I've listened to them once or twice. It's not really my bag. But the fact that they've done the opposite way kind of, it proves that that's the case. Yeah. That you do something out of necessity because they probably, when they were started, didn't have much money, needed to do it cheap. They didn't have a drummer. It was the same with Animals as Leaders. They didn't have. All their drums are programmed on the first album, aren't they? It's like a needs must,
from Periphery did them.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's kind of like a needs must thing, isn't it? Just to get the concept out.
Right.
And then you kind of once you got the money, you get the amps and everything else, I guess.
Yeah, and get the real drummer.
Because it is expensive. That's the thing. But then the music business. But then I suppose it's reflective of the actual changes to the music business and how it works now. Because you go back to sort of like the 70s, and obviously I wasn't alive then, but even just before the internet. So like I'm old enough to know what it was like before the internet was like what it is now. And you had to get all your music, find out new bands from basically magazines, because that was it. There wasn't really anything else. You couldn't just go online and Google.
Or your friends. Yeah.
Or your friends, or go to shows and stuff. But it was all kind of like word of mouth, print magazine stuff like that. And yeah, it's I can't remember what I was going to say. I got lost then. It's my old age kid.
No. Yeah, you were talking about how everything's kind of streaming now, and it didn't used to be. And you used to get everything from your friends, like someone would come and loan me a CD, and that's how I found new music. And from magazines too, like Enemy and stuff like that, Guitar World sometimes, but most of it was very insulated, where now like a band can come out with something and it could be on Spotify instantly. Yeah, and I think that's a good conversation for a new episode. Maybe we should do that one next week.
I know what my point was going to be. Sorry, when I got sidetracked.
Okay, go for it.
Sort of 20, 30 years ago, if you were a band and you got signed, they were like, right, you're going to be a big deal because we're going to put a load of money into you. We're going to get your album done. We're going to send you on tours. It was much more organized. It was more focused. Whereas now, and I'd say from about the sort of early 2000 onwards, that dynamic has kind of changed now, where labels kind of expect you to be a self-sufficient, almost like a well-known, established band or artist in your own right before they would even consider giving you a contract. But the flip side of that is now that they've kind of lost their leverage, because most people now realize that they no longer need a record label to distribute their music and be successful anymore. So it's kind of gone full circle, and then another tilt on the axis even more. But that's what I mean, I suppose, when you go back to like the Doors era, Zeppelin, Sabbath, all that kind of like, even like Metallica, Maiden, and like Pantera kind of era, just right up to the early 2000s, you'd be signed to a label. Like the new metal era was probably the last, as much as people hate new metal, that was probably the last era where you had, bands were getting signed, getting the kind of financial input that was required to sort of become big. And then
100%.
You get the equipment, the guitars, the amps, the studio, the access, the producers. And obviously the internet kind of came around and kind of democratized the distribution of music to the extent that anyone can make music, like you say, with Periphery, just recorded in their bedroom. So when you have lots of people producing content, more content, it becomes harder to stand out. So even though it's easier to make music, it's actually probably infinitely harder to be successful now, even though it's much easier to get your music out to people because there's so many people doing it. It's much harder to have an impact because the market's so saturated with, there's probably, do you know what I mean? There's new bands, new tracks coming out every day. It's hard to see how like you get a band like say like Tool or someone of that level.
I don't even know if they would make it.
No, what I mean is I'm not talking about them specifically, but I'm just using them as an example. They're like a band that they've released 4 albums in like nearly 3 decades, and they go on a tour and they'll make $8 million each for a world tour, and then they'll come back again, and then they'll sit around in the mansions for a bit, probably play a guitar, and then they'll go out and do another tour in a few years' time. I mean, this tour probably could be their last one because they're like 60 now, aren't they? So, but what I mean is, it's like I can't, it's like who's going to be the next sort of like these huge bands, or is it just going to be lots of like niche bands that are very popular within their niche, like Periphery? They're immensely popular, but they haven't really been on my radar. And I'm a proper, I consider myself like predominantly, I like metal, not that kind of metal though. I'm more kind of like a slow kind of stonery, kind of Melvin's sort of doomy, kind of sludgy, bluesy kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, 100%.
My brother likes them a lot, but they've never really been on my radar. So it's kind of like that niche of kind of proggy modern metal, I guess. It's not really my thing. But then that's a huge thing in itself. But it's now these bands have become like their own sort of like tribes, I guess. Because like there's a guy called Seth Godin who writes a lot of books about marketing and stuff like that, and he talks about like be your own tribe. So you want to sort of make, and then Periphery, a really good example of that. And like you said, they basically self-starters, recorded in their bedrooms, got some music out. People liked it, and then
created a whole new genre.
Yeah,
people. What's where the gent genre thing came from. Gent, because it's the sound of the DJENT.
I know gent. I thought Meshuggah invented gent.
Well, they Meshuggah definitely invented it, but Periphery are the ones who kind of got that term out.
Okay.
100%. Yeah.
Well.
But they kind of invented that whole brand new genre. But that's definitely that's a future episode for sure. We'll have to talk about how the music business has changed, because I had a record deal in the early 2000s, and it was much different than anything you would get now. And we can definitely talk about that. But that does kind of tie into everything. There's a lot of people like Billie Eilish, who some people say is a Nepo baby or whatever because her parents had money. But I mean, the fact is, her and her brother made a bunch of songs in their bedroom, put it on SoundCloud, and next thing you know, she's playing the Grammys. Yeah, like 4 or 5 years later.
You can't fault that. I mean, also, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but at the end of the day, it's that, isn't it? But then Ed Sheeran's like, everyone loves that guy as well, so there's no accounting for taste, really, is there?
No.
I mean, he's an odd one. He's a very odd one. Sometimes when I see him, he's a good singer and he can play guitar, but I'm always like, why him? Why not like the million other people who can do what he does, or do what he does? It's just an odd, thing. It's like, what's that thing that used to talk about when they say it's like a frog up a pole, and everyone's like, how did it get up there? Everyone's like, I don't know, but it's up there. So it's a frog up a pole. No one knows how it got up there. Yeah, it's just up there. So it's a thing.
Well, I kind of have an aversion to any guys that are young and good looking playing acoustic guitar. Well, I kind of have an aversion to that, no matter what. I don't know. A bunch of girls would disagree with you. They describe their bras on stage.
I would say he's a good guitarist. He's a good singer. But I would not describe him as good looking in the traditional pop sense, if you know what I mean.
Okay, yeah, he's no Jonas Brother. I'll give you that.
No, he's definitely not. But I mean, he's not. He's really not.
Or AJR.
I
I
don't know
think
who
they're
that
the
is.
new thing. I don't know who it is.
He's not
either.
boy
I just
band
saw
good
them
looking,
on
is what I'm saying. which is
Spotify the other day.
Yeah, he's not boy band
Right,
good
no,
looking,
he's not a
that's my point.
Backstreet Boy.
No, he's not. But you know, he
But
is.
the only acoustic guitar guy that gets a pass for me is probably Elliott Smith. I think he can get away with it.
Oh yeah, Alex Smith.
And the dude from Mezzy Star, they can get away with it too. But 9 times out of 10, like John Mayer, love him with an electric guitar, with an acoustic guitar. No thanks, can't do it.
Bruce Springsteen, Nebraska. That album is fantastic, and that was just him on acoustic guitar and a 4-track, and that's probably one of the best albums he's ever
Man,
done.
you know what? You're right.
He's really that album's
There's a
very
couple-
good. That's like, he was,
There's a
he did
couple
it.
on Born to Run, too.
Yeah, but he
No,
did it
you're
after.
right.
I think he did it after Born to Run. So it's kind of like he was basically.
It was.
Yeah, and it was just a huge. Born to Run was a massive deal, and then he just kind of like, you know what? Everyone was like, "Oh, the next what's it going to be next?" You know, down, 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 and he's just sort of like, "No, it's just me and the acoustic guitar and a 4-track," which is great.
Yeah, we're going to strip it all back.
Yeah, literally,
Yep.
just him in his bedroom. Like, come on, that's so rock and roll. It's unbelievable, and it's a great album as well. Like, it's one of my favorites. Another one
agree.
as well. Neutral Milk Hotel, like guitar, singing, acoustic guitar, twanging. They're not exclusively acoustic guitar, but he does play it a lot, and yeah, they're fantastic.
That was that kind of first wave emo that kind of happened around in the MySpace days, right? Like Neutral Milk Hotel
Neutral
and
Milk Hotel's like 90s.
Bright Eyes.
No, Neutral Milk Hotel is
really?
like 19, like In an Airplane Over the Sea is, I think it's like 1994, 95, because they were meant to be like the next big thing, and then he basically just went completely nuts and just moved off to live in the woods.
Wow.
Yeah, because they were he was, I think it was
I had
after
no idea.
Kurt Cobain had died, and he was like, he's going to be the next, you know, big deal. And then I think he had some
everybody
issues.
was going to be the next Nirvana.
Yeah, and I think he had some like mental
I didn't know
issues,
that.
or he didn't deal with fame particularly well, and he kind of just was like, no, I'm not doing this, and then he just kind of disappeared. Jeff Mangum, I think his name is, and just went off and lived the quiet life. But I saw them at
I'm definitely going to look that up.
yeah, I mean, it's probably, I definitely haven't made it up. There probably is some truth to it, but that was the spark notes of what I think happened. Because that in an Airplane Over the Sea or an Airplane Over the Ocean, I can't remember what it's called. I should know what it's called because it's literally one of my favorite albums of all time. It's the best sounding acoustic guitar I've ever heard, like on a record as well. I don't even know how they might.
And it was probably done so easily. It was probably just a microphone in the middle of the room or something.
I think it's a cheap nylon string guitar, and he just hammers the crap out of it, and it sounds like it sounds glorious. It sounds huge.
Just majestic.
Yeah. But that's the thing, I suppose. You don't need to have an expensive guitar to sound good, which is a pretty good segue into the PRS SE lineup and the new SC.
Yeah, you stole what I was going to say. I hate
it's a
you,
segue.
dude.
Nice.
That's exactly what I was. Yeah, that's what I was going to do.
Sorry.
I was going to say, speaking of not having to have nice gear, no, you're right. And they just did a blowout sale, and it's ridiculous that some of the you own a PRS.
I do.
Yeah, you have the
Very nice.
custom 22,
24.
and
I think it is. 20,
you have the 24.
Yeah, 24 SE.
Yeah.
With the whammy bar. The whammy.
And yeah, those were selling for like ridiculous prices. And the thing is since you bought yours, they've changed the lineup to where it's closer to the core line. So, say like the John Mayer guitar, the Silver Sky. You know, if you were to buy the American one, those are $2,500 or so. The SE version is $700. And it's like 90% of the American version. You know what I
What's
mean?
the difference?
It's like 90% there.
What's the difference?
The wood,
right.
the paint colors. I mean, there's not really a whole lot of difference. There's a couple
just
of
trivial stuff that doesn't really
specs
matter.
that are different. Right. And so their entire lineup is like that. So the Custom 24, the 2408s, the McCarty, the DGT, all of those are so close to being like the core line now that I can't see myself ever buying a core model when you can buy one that's like 90% as good. You know, I mean, people are touring with these too. And I made a recent trip up to Nashville to see a buddy of mine who is recording. And you wouldn't believe how many PRS SE guitars are in that studio.
No way.
Like just for people to use. There has to be, like, yours is in there. They had a bunch of custom 22s. They had a McCarty. They had a DGT. Okay. And, they all had locking tuners. I think it's the only thing that they changed, so they can change the strings really quick when you're recording. But other than that, like, they're just bone stock. They haven't done anything to these guitars.
But is that kind of is this to do with the level of, because I know people talk about like, oh, it's made in America and it's handcrafted and all that kind of stuff, and there is an element to that as well, which is there is a huge difference. I mean, my dad he plays acoustic guitars and he's got some really nice ones, and you can tell with them. You can tell like the difference, even between individual models he has. It's the nuance between the sounds you get out of it, like the bass response, the tone, the lows, the mids, the highs. It's incredible. And obviously with things like Gibson guitars and Fender guitars and the high ends or custom shop stuff is always going to sound great. But what people seem to forget is that manufacturing processes and technology have advanced so much in the last 20 years. And obviously that has a knock-on effect. It's getting better and better and better. So eventually, the stigma of, oh, it's a mass-produced guitar in a factory, maybe that day is kind of over now, because if they're producing these guitars at such a high quality, high standard, then who cares? If it's as good, then who cares? If it sounds as good, then who cares? And the whole debate over wood, I don't know. I mean, Buzz Allen Melvins uses an aluminium guitar, and so does Aaron Turner, I think, of Old Man Gloom. What are they called? Is it what they call the metal guitar?
The Electrical Guitar Company is the name of the company. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and quite a lot. And they make the neck is all aluminum.
Yeah,
and the body is plastic, 80%. It's like 80% aluminum, and then there's a piece of wood right down the middle. So, I mean, like the tone wood argument, we can do that one day too. But that's not necessarily something I've ever really believed in. So, but you do have a point with the CNC machines are just insanely accurate now. So you don't really need a whole lot of human attention to get these guitars out. And sure, when you buy a core PRS, it's going to be handmade. It's going to be hand carved. It's still going through a CNC machine before it gets to the person who carves the neck and all of that stuff. But it definitely will have that feeling of quality to it that you're talking about with your dad's acoustics. Yeah. It does have that, because I've had USA PRS guitars before, and they're amazing. Don't get me wrong, they're great. But after playing these SEs, especially for reviews for our website, I mean, the difference is that gap is narrowing really quick. And something that guitarists always forget, and something that you should definitely think about: no one cares on stage. No. Like no one else is a guitar player out there in the crowd. You might have one or two that's going to be like, oh, he's playing a cheap guitar. Yeah. But if you sound amazing, then who cares? 90% of the audience doesn't care. They don't care what you're playing. You could be up there with a $99 Squire, like
Mike from Mike and the Mechanics.
Mike Rutherford from Genesis and Mike and the Mechanics. He toured with a Squire.
Squire Bullet, yeah.
He just liked them.
Yeah, he just loved it. He said we did an article on it. He said it was during lockdown. I think he was in South Africa or somewhere, and he couldn't get out, obviously. And he just got one from a shop and just played it and was like, this is great. And then he just made his guitar tech did a few mods on it, but nothing special. And that was it. And he played it on the tour. You know, and that's like stadium rock. So,
yeah.
Which is,
with a huge band, you know?
This is the kind of thing that I think PRS is probably, they seem to be a lot more savvy than like the Gibsons of the world. They seem to be a bit more switched on to the modern buyer and the way things kind of work and what people want. Like they obviously have they obviously sell. It's the same with anything though. If you have a mid-range product, you're going to sell way more of them than the expensive one. Like Samsung, right? This is a complete segue into tech. Samsung is the second biggest phone manufacturer in the world, right? But like a good 80% of its volume in sales comes from its cheap phones, because it makes a phone at every single price point, like literally from $100 up to $1,000. And the vast majority of its sales come from its cheap stuff. The flagship phones.
That's me. That's what I buy.
Yeah, the flagship phones account for such
I buy the A series.
Sales. Yeah, they account for such a small amount of its sales, and the same is obviously true with guitar brands. Like, and PRS has obviously been like, you know what, you can have the mass market guitars, which is what the SE lineup is, and then you have the high end stuff for the pros. Mm-hmm. And the pros are always going to buy the high end stuff because that's what you do, and that's what you want. And even if the sound is not, even if there's not that much difference, it's like, you know, you'd still would. You get that. Like if you're into cars, you know, if someone says to you, you know, you want to get like a BMW M3, and you can buy like one of the classic iconic models from like 20 years ago, and it costs more than the new version. If you love cars, you're going to be like, I want that one. I want that one because it's got, you know, the naturally aspirated engine. It's not got any of the stupid software in it. It's just proper. So I guess there's that argument to it, and they've obviously just done the economics on it, and they realised that more people are going to be picking up playing guitar. Why not playing PRS? You know, spend $100, $200 more, and you can get the PRS over a Squier. I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? And Squier,
yeah, I mean, it really is.
Well, Squier guitars are quite expensive now, so.
Oh yeah, some of them get up to $400 or $500 now. So if you add another $100 to that, you could have a PRS. You know, a John Mayer PRS.
Exactly, it's a no-brainer. Like Squier has that because they've just done all the bargain basement, you know, $90 guitar thing. So they kind of have this stigma around them, where it's, you know, it's a Squier guitar, it's rubbish, because it's like the not Fender guitar. Whereas PRS,
right?
Is PRS. So if you get a PRS guitar, and their focus on quality has always been very stringent, so then even the mid-range stuff is going to be really good. And that's kind of branding and reputation for producing quality product kind of does them a lot of favors, which is, you know, like say with the Gibson, kind of like, you know, it's almost like they're just doing the high end stuff, you know, the super expensive stuff. And
right, I checked yesterday, and the cheapest Gibson that you can get that's a proper Gibson is around $1,800. And that's your entry point. That's bare bones. It has nothing special about it. No beautiful top, nothing like that. Just straight plain color guitar. Here it is. You know, and that's $1,800. Whereas you can go with PRS and you could buy an S2 model that's made in the USA. Exactly. And it's the same thing, you know. It's crazy. But I think one of the things that make PRS stand out so much is their CEO is firstly a guitar player, but second, he's still alive. You know, the people who created Fender and Gibson, well, the guy who created Fender didn't even play guitar. Leo Fender never picked one up in his life, but he knew how to make them. And the difference is that Paul is still alive. He's in control of the company, and he's a guitar player himself. And that's why I think people like John Mayer and Mark Tremonti and all the new metal bands that played PRS, I think that's why they kind of flock to that brand, because this guy knows about guitars. He builds them.
And cares about them as well.
He's still around.
and he cares
right,
about it.
and
There's like a
really
level of,
cares about the quality.
There's like a
And
level
really
of,
cares about the quality.
yeah, like it's a business, obviously. Like, but Fender
Right.
and Gibson are kind of like it's almost like they're a business first and a guitar company second, if that makes sense.
They're like Harley Davidson these days.
Yeah,
They're like a
an institution.
lifestyle
Yeah,
brand.
but the bottom line is always going to
Right.
be
Yeah.
the bottom line's always going to be the biggest thing. Like at the board meetings and stuff, it's always going to be, oh, the bottom line. What are we going to do? What's new? Whereas I don't get that impression with like brands like PRS and even like Ibanez to an extent. That they just seem to be more kind of innovative and more agile and more kind of open to just dealing with customers and wants and needs, as opposed to just doing the Apple model, which is like, no, this is what you want and this is how much it costs, and come buy it. Like, you know what I mean? It's just there's so much more choice now with product and things you can have, and like say, I mean, obviously there's a segue coming up in a minute on this, but I don't know. I mean, when I was growing up, I always used to really want a Gibson Les Paul. Like that was not my ideal perfect guitar, but I don't think I'd buy one now.
As a
If I was
person
given one, I'd
who,
take it, but I don't think I'd go out and spend like $2,500 on one. I just wouldn't. I just wouldn't do it. I'd rather have like 3 other guitars. Do you know what I mean? For the same price.
right, yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, and that's the main title of this episode is, are Gibson guitars becoming irrelevant? And yeah, that's a good way to segue into that, because I was kind of the same way when I was growing up. Now that you mention it, I think I saw Slash and ZZ Top and people playing, and I was like, man, I really want a Les Paul, and I finally got one. I got an Epiphone, and it was good, for the mid '90s, it was good, and I eventually got the real thing, and I played the real thing for a long time, and I sold my last one about 8 years ago, and I never looked back, because when I went to go buy a new one, I think I tried out maybe 10 in the store, and all of them had something like glaringly wrong. Like something that should not have made it out of, QC at all.
No way.
Yeah, out of 10 guitars. And, they did the robot tuner thing there for a little while, which is funny.
Yeah.
But I mean, their main problem is the current pricing structure, to get into Gibson guitars in this economy, you've got to pay $2,000.
Which is just insane. No one's going to pay
getting
that.
in the door. And then if you don't know how to fix your own guitars, if you don't know how to set up your guitars, then you're going to have to pay for that too, because unfortunately they don't come set up usually. And so
I didn't know that. Well, they don't come
too.
set up. There's $2,500 and they don't even come set up.
It might be set up when it leaves the factory, but then it could be sitting in a box in a warehouse.
It's one of those things I think you don't see. Also, you don't see people.
Guitar store.
Yeah, you don't see people playing them either. That's the thing. Like everyone,
not at all.
Play Fender, do a lot of PRS guitars. Go to a festival. Most people. When you go to a festival, I've been on for a while, but I noticed that most people play Fender, Tellys, Strats, Jazzmasters. I saw quite a lot of PRS guitars as well, Ibanez, but you very rarely see people playing Les Pauls now.
That's a great point, because I went to the Warped Tour, not the last year, but the year before the last year. I think it was 2018. And I noticed that I didn't see one Gibson throughout all of those metal, hardcore, and punk bands. Everybody was playing ESP LTDs. They were playing Schecter. They were playing PRS. I even saw a few Epiphones up there, but I did not see one Gibson out of all of the bands that I saw. And these are big bands, like Every Time I Die and Norma Jean, and you would think that those guys would be playing something really expensive. But no, if you even look at their rigs online, it's usually an LTD
Yeah, I was going to
with
say
EMGs in it, and
it's the
it does the
pickups, so
job. It works.
Yeah, well, bands, ESP, Shatter, PRS, these guys, they're appealing to more, they have more variability in the range as well. That you can do more with one of them, and they're cheaper too, and they probably sound better. I mean,
absolutely.
Some of the Epiphone, those periphery models were ridiculous, and the guy at Trivium's custom one is ridiculously not high spec. I mean, it's expensive too, but it's just it's weird. It's almost like they've stopped. They haven't really done anything new. I know the guitar hasn't changed that much, but the lack of variability in the range, they're kind of soon to be getting by on this all like, well, it just sounds better, that's why you pay the money. And it's like, but does
it's
it?
nostalgia. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost like the difference between, like, for instance, you see people wearing like these Ralph Lauren polo shirts, right? And they're like a little polo shirt with a little man on the horse, and it's like $80, $90, $100 for that shirt, right? It's just 100% cotton polo shirt. You walk into like H&M and you can buy 100% cotton, exactly the same, for like 12 quid. And it doesn't have a little man on the horse on it, but it's the same. That's the same. This is the same with guitars now. Like, why would you spend $2,500 on a Gibson Les Paul when you could pay 700 quid and get like an Epiphone that's just as good, more or less, where it counts? Like, you're not Slash,
right?
So you don't need, and he only probably plays them because he gets them for free. Do you know what I mean? If he was like, come on, Slash, you got to spend your own money now. What are you spending it on? What are you going to buy? He's probably just getting, I quite like the Epiphone, it's quite nice. And it's, because even like people with tons of money, most of them are still pretty shrewd. They're not just going to like piss their money away on stuff just because they can. I mean, some people do, but people with brain in the head kind of go, you know what, money's scarce. I have some of it, so I should be careful with it, and I'm fortunate to have it. I shouldn't be squandering it on stupid things. So, got tossed up between a £2,500 Gibson Les Paul that sounds great, or, $800 on a Epiphone Les Paul, or even a ESP Les Paul that sounds better. It's got a faster neck, probably nicer wood. It's mental. It's crazy. I mean, we talked about this before, but I don't really see them being, the relevancy is just gone. It's just bottomed out now for me. I think for a lot of other people too.
Well, little known fact, Slash didn't play a Gibson Les Paul on Appetite for Destruction. The famous Appetite for Destruction Les Paul was a copy. It was made by a luthier, and that lived around San Francisco, I want to say. And Slash went to him and was like, "Hey man, can you make me a Gibson copy?" And he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So that famous Gibson that's on that album is not a Gibson.
No way.
At all.
So they've got like a lot of, but beyond
that famous sound that everyone wants.
But beyond the kind of... It's
not even a real Gibson.
Yeah, but beyond the kind of, they're just stupidly expensive and arguably they sound good. I'm not going to say they're bad guitars because they're not bad guitars, but like you said, you tried 10 and each one of them had something wrong with it, which isn't good.
Right.
And obviously,
but I have had a good one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's good ones.
And when you get a good one, they're pretty magical. I mean, they do the thing. They do the Les Paul thing.
That's fine, but they're not making unicorns, are they? That's the point. If you're going to be charging
there's no magic
as a singular product and you're mass producing it, and you expect people to buy them, then the QC needs to be there, right? It needs to have the quality across the board. Otherwise, you might as well just have the custom shops reserved for literal, bespoke orders, and then just do what PRS is doing with the SE line and just make them a lot cheaper and stop wasting your factory workers' time and rushing them to do stuff.
Well, I think their biggest problem going in to this new generation of guitar players is going to be optics. You don't see, like I said, at the festivals, everyone wanting LTD and Schecter and Fender because they're cheaper and because that's just what they like. But you don't see new guitarists playing Gibson. So that means that this generation coming up that are looking at bands like Polyphia and bands like Periphery. There's too many bands that start with P, by the way.
No.
But they're looking at all these guys and they're playing
PRS.
PRS and they're playing Schecter.
Yeah.
That plays Gibson. Yeah, I can't think of one. Actually, I can. And the
From Tool.
Adam Jones. Yeah, well, I mean, but he's had the same 4 guitars his entire life, so they're all copies of each other. But
yeah.
No, I was going to say there's that band that sounds just like Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. But didn't Jimmy Page play a Telecaster on the albums?
Jimmy did, yeah, on Led Zeppelin 1 and 2.
Yeah, I thought
that's a Tele. But no, there's a band from your country, and you guys have to claim them because we sure as hell want. They sound just like Led Zeppelin, and I'm trying to think of the name of them.
Oh, Greta Van.
Everyone gives them hell for it. Greta Van Fleet. Yep.
Greta Van Fleet. Yeah.
Fleet.
I mean, they do sound a lot like Led Zeppelin. So
yeah, that's you guys' fault. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we do have Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, so you know.
Yeah, you do. We got
that's another point though.
No,
like the SG,
they're Australian.
Yeah, like the SG is a great guitar, but you didn't really see anyone play them anymore either, which is odd considering how iconic it is.
They don't.
With like AC/DC, Black Sabbath, and then I can't think of anyone that plays one of them. I mean, the guy, what's it called? Out of I think Pepper out of Down plays one. But I think he plays ESP though, doesn't he? And it's a baritone, so I don't think it's not Gibson.
He quit playing Gibson. Pepper Keenan from Corrosion of Conformity. Yeah, he quit after Corrosion. Yeah, after he broke up Corrosion and Conformity. He quit playing Gibson and he went to ESP, and he plays that Viper.
The Viper, yeah,
now,
baritone,
which is an SG. It's an SG shape, but yeah, he has 2 of them, and one of them's a baritone. So
what's the deal?
Yeah, even people like that have moved over.
Yeah. So what's the deal with like the lawsuits and the bankruptcy? Because obviously it can't be good times in the accounting department at Gibson, particularly with all the competition and stuff that they have now.
Yeah.
The fact that the most basic range is going to cost you the best part of $2,000 to get in. They can't be selling like a high number of guitars. They just can't with those prices.
Well, Gibson's kind of been in a bad spot since probably the mid '80s.
Are they like the Aston Martin of guitars? They basically super expensive
100%,
and always going bankrupt.
and always going bankrupt. Yeah. So I mean, with the '80s, I can understand that because everyone wanted to be Eddie Van Halen. Everyone was buying Kramer and Jackson guitars and stuff like that. No one was buying classic guitars anymore. And Gibson tried to get into that with Floyd Roses and stuff like that, and they just couldn't do it. So about 1988, they were pretty much out. And another company swooped in and bought them and saved them from bankruptcy. And then the 90s had a huge resurgence in these classic guitars because of grunge, and people started buying Fender and Gibson again. And they were doing really well up until about the mid 2000s when they had this bankruptcy thing again. And they have like this revolving door of CEOs that are from investment firms. They're not guitar players. And
that's a good thing.
Instead of just making a good product and going with it, they're trying to sue people like Dean Guitars.
Yeah.
Or they tried to sue PRS. They tried to do Paul Reed Smith in 2004 or 2005 because he made a single cut guitar that looked like a Les Paul. Well, he still makes those.
Yeah.
Because he won the suit. So that was, millions and millions of dollars down the drain, and they keep doing that. And the one with Dean, they ended up winning. But at the end, their net on that was maybe, I don't know, $700,000 that they got out of the lawsuit. Yeah. So, I mean, was it even worth it?
Yeah.
So they're just kind of running themselves down into the ground with the bankruptcy.
Drowning in lawyer fees.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that's the thing.
But I mean, the main thing is they're just not going to appeal to this new generation. This new generation is going to have completely different guitar heroes, and they're going to go after Ibanez or LTD or
yeah. I kind of get what they're trying to do.
Even Jackson.
They kind of like trying to position themselves as like, this is the guitar you get when you've made it, sort of thing. Like, when you can spend like stupid money on a guitar, but it's, as a business model, I think that's just so flawed. And like you say, they have the issues with the QC, refusal to change designs. It's the relevancy thing. And relevancy is probably the most important thing a brand can have. Like, if you're not relevant, you're done, because you just are.
Yeah, no,
and it's so hard to get relevancy back.
Yeah,
like you can't get it, you can't buy it. I mean, you can try, but it's very hard. Like, all the things that have become relevant over time and become popular are done. It's organic. Somebody will start using. Like, it's like Fender's a really good example of this, because I think, like, they have a lot of variation, well, more than Gibson do, and things like the Jazzmaster keeps, from the 50s to now, it'll go out of favor, then it'll come back again, then it'll go out of favor, then it'll come back again. Same with the Telecaster, it's hugely popular. It's always been popular, but it kind of ebbs and flows from being like popular to ultra popular. Same with the Strat, and I just don't see that, like with Gibson, which is odd. And once you get your back against the wall, like they kind of are now, I think you become reticent to spend money on like R&D to do something different, because you're like, oh, we can't do it if we mess it up, or everyone will laugh at us. Like like that stupid what was that, the electro tuner guitar or something, some stupid robot guitar. Yeah, the robot tuners.
Yeah, I came on every single guitar that year. Like, so could you imagine spending $3,000 on a period correct Les Paul from the 60s, and it has robot tuners on it? Yeah, I mean,
the stick of never tuned.
So many people freaked out over that.
Yeah, but that's the kind of thing that's just doing. I mean, you're not doing anything, then you do something that stupid. It's almost like, have you ever heard of baby steps? Like, come on.
Well, I mean, like does made in the USA mean anything to you? Because like the new London store, the new Gibson Garage, just opened in downtown London, and a lot of people are saying that was a really bad move, because does that even really mean anything to you?
No.
Like, does made in the USA mean anything to you? I mean, no. Clearly it's going to be a slightly better product, but
well,
on a global economy, does that even matter to people?
I don't know. I think the whole made in the USA thing is it's a loaded marketing term that's now being used to just sell stuff at a higher cost, because it goes against, because when you think of everything's manufactured in China or Asia now, most things anyway. When you say, made in the US, you think, oh, wow, it's made in the US. It must be good. It's like, well, why? Well, the manufacturing's done by countries like China and Indonesia and Malaysia, where they specialize in manufacturing. Surely they would be better at it than American people. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about the manufacturing processes and technology that they use now is so ridiculous, and it's so advanced to what it was even 10 years ago, that yeah, you know, handmade guitars are always going to be a thing and they're always going to sound good, but it's just, to me, it's just a marketing term. It's just, you know, you can play made in the Mexican Fenders are, you know, the MIM Fenders are like the prime example of that. You know,
oh yeah, 100%.
Like the Fender Player Series versus the made in the USA ones. Like, come on, what's the difference? I mean, Jack White plays a Mexican Tele, and he's modded it to hell, and it's Jack White. He plays it. Like, if he plays it, if it's good enough for him, then it's good enough for anybody. That guy's got tens of millions of dollars, and he chooses to play a MIM Telecaster. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know about it, really. It's just marketing nonsense to try and sell really expensive guitars to people with lots of money. And I don't even think there's anything aspirational about it anymore either. That's the kind of thing for me. I think it's with the tools that people have now, with instruments and technology, things like DAW, you know, the software you can run on your computer. It's just becoming, you know, people just want a proficient, reliable guitar that, you know, holds its tune, decent pickups. You know, the debate over woods is kind of done, I think. And even if it's not done to you and you think, oh no, what does matter? Most people don't care. You know, there's a lot of people that argue about operating systems. They're just like, I just don't care. You know, I don't care anymore. You know, like, oh, Mac's better than Windows, or Windows is better than Mac. And then some guys like, well, Linux.
No,
is
we've
better
kind
than
of reached a
Linux.
singularity.
Like, who cares? Yeah. Like, no one cares because the applications of what you do with it are all the same anyway. Like, you give a good guitarist a piece of wood with some strings on it, he'll get a good sound out of it. It doesn't make any difference if it's made in America or made in Gibraltar. It doesn't matter. It's just part. I think that's part of the problem with Gibson, is that they're kind of trying to ride on this kind of like old American dream era kind of nonsense that's sort of like, America, yeah, you know, like made in America. And you think of a guy in, you know, the Canadian jumpsuit with a cowboy hat on, smoking a Marlboro, fashioning you a guitar, and I just don't think, you know, riding in on a horse. Like,
well, I mean, that's the way people.
Aviators.
No, that's the way people think here, though. That's. I mean, a lot of Americans, not all Americans, but a lot of Americans are very insular. You know, they're very myopic when it comes to things like that. You know.
That's a big place, man. That's
very patriotic. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I love America. I've been there loads of times. You don't have to leave America. That's the thing about America, because it's got everything there. You want snow, it's got snow. You want heat, it's got heat. You want humidity, it's got humidity. It's kind of got every single. It's like a microclimate within itself. It's got everything you could possibly want. It's got mountains. It's got tropical. It's got, you know, desert.
I was about to say, yeah, you can go from the jungles in Florida with alligators. And 9 hours later, you can be in them, you know?
Yeah, it's an incredible place. But that's what I mean. I think there's outside the USA, from my external perspective, as like somebody that buys guitars and plays guitars and stuff, is the made in America thing doesn't carry any weight anymore. I don't think, to me personally. I know that there's, you know, custom shop stuff is special and it's nice, and some luthiers had, you know, their good time on the neck and all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, for me, just nah. Even if I had the money, I wouldn't care. I'd buy a Player Series Fender. I wouldn't buy a Gibson. I just wouldn't. I'd buy an ESP. If I wanted a Les Paul guitar, I'd buy an ESP, 100%.
Well, the thing that they're trying to do right now is they're trying to boost Epiphone to kind of fill in that mid-range spot. And they have a new lineup now called Inspired by Gibson. And it's basically a Gibson, but it says Epiphone on the headstock. Yeah. And all of the changes and all of the things they've done to Epiphones to make them different from a Gibson guitar, that's all taken away now. So it's basically a Gibson. It just says Epiphone on it. And those are around $1,300 or $1,400, which is a pretty good price. Expensive.
Yeah, it's still super expensive, though.
But still super expensive when you can get a PRS for $799, you know? But I mean, the thing is just they refuse to change the designs, and the world has moved on, and they could completely restructure. And I think it would work out really well for them if they kept all of that. Like if you want your 60s or 50s spec, Les Paul or SG or, especially ES 355s and stuff like that. Those are historic.
Yeah.
100%. If you want that, fine. Absolutely. Have that option. You have that. Those are going to be $3,500. No problem. If you want to get into Gibson guitars, though, they should have something like those high-end Epiphone models, but put the Gibson name on the headstock.
Yeah.
Instead of charging $1,400 for an Epiphone, just put the Gibson name on it. You can make them overseas. Put the Gibson name on it, because that's what people are paying for. Because some people are just really embarrassed to have an Epiphone for whatever reason. So put that Gibson name on something that's made in South Korea, or even made in the Epiphone plant. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah,
and if they did that.
Yeah. And I think at this stage of the game as well, they're not. No one cares anyway.
No one cares.
They don't have, their reputation isn't great anyway. So if they came out with a really solid mid-range kind of product like Gibson, I don't know what you call it, Gibson something series, people would love it. They'd be like, shit, yeah, I like this. It's good. 700, because the expectations are lower. You're not expecting it to be amazing. But if you over-deliver, kind
of like PRS. Exactly. If you over-deliver on something that's not supposed to be great.
Yeah. Then
and if you bring that price down to $1,000, like let's say the price of entry now for a Gibson that's made overseas or even made in America, but kind of stripped back. Let's say it's $1,000. That's going to bring in so many other people. But what they could also do with that lineup is modernize it and put features on it that people want, and fix the things that are wrong with the old guitars. Because if you buy a 50 spec Gibson and you drop it one time, that headstock is off. It's gone. It's breaking. And then you glue it back together. And most people say it's not a real Les Paul until it's been broken at least once. And but if they fixed that, if they did like a scarf neck joint, they put a Tuscan nut, they put jumbo frets on it. I mean, like, they would sell 1 million of them if they were like $1,000. But they're so focused on being a lifestyle brand and selling coffee mugs and bar stools and ridiculous stuff like that.
That's what I mean. Though, but
T-shirts.
that's the thing. They become a parody of themselves almost. They become like a caricature of what they were, and it's almost, the guitars are almost secondary now to the branding exercise, which is never a good thing, particularly for a guitar brand, because kind of if your guitars suck, then it's over, isn't it? And you can't really get back from that. So, I think if they did $800 to $1,000 series of guitars and let Epiphone do its own thing and go back to being like cheaper, and like say using the high-end Epiphones as Gibsons, I think that solves all of the problems and makes them relevant. That's my dog going crazy.
Well, I think another thing that they could do is they could market better. Also, the reason that Fender's doing so well is look at any Fender ad right now. Pull it up on YouTube. Any Fender ad that you see, it's going to be young people. It's always focused on young people playing. And I think that really works for Fender, because young people are picking up Fenders. And that's what's keeping them relevant. They're not writing off the idea that Jimi Hendrix played a Fender. They're writing off the idea of, if we continue to show people these guitars and sign the right artists and stuff like that, which is something that Gibson also doesn't do. I mean, they have Dave Mustaine and Jerry Cantrell and Slash and all of these people from 30 years ago.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like,
and then Ibanez Ibanez
Ibanez have
has
absolutely
Polyphia,
ton of
and
people. They've got everybody.
they have Meshuggah. They have everyone. They have Periphery. Jake
They
from
have people from
Periphery
jazz.
plays
They have jazz
Ibanez.
guitarists.
Periphery is.
Santana. They have jazz guitarists. They have like
yeah, George
classical
Benson.
people. Yeah, they have everybody. They're like, that's what I mean. It's like if you just Gibson is just.
I give Gibson 10 years
to turn it around. Well, they need to do something. I just don't think, I can't see them being. And this is the thing with big companies. Big companies fall harder and faster than small companies because their operating costs are huge, astronomically much bigger than a smaller, more independent company. They have more moving parts. They have more overhead. So when stuff starts going bad and going sideways, it happens really quick. Like, I know I keep bringing back to technology examples, but I was a technology journalist for a long time, still am. BlackBerry in 2009 was the biggest company in the world, the fastest growing company in the world.
I remember.
In 2009. 6 years later, they were gone. And that's because they didn't change and adapt. They're like, no, people like phones with buttons. People don't care about the internet on the phone. People don't care about cameras on the phone. The parallels between that and what Gibson is doing are so obvious to me from a business perspective because they're just not listening to what people want. They're not listening to the market. They're not seeing where it's going.
100%.
Yeah, like Wayne Gretzky said, you got to go where the puck's going. That's how you become good. That's what great players do. They go where the puck's going. That they know where it's going to go, and they go there. You know, just trying to just hawk the same old stuff to generation after generation after generation of people isn't going to work. You get away with it in the 70s and 80s and 90s because we didn't have the internet. But now, you know, you don't have to be a mega brand with tens of millions of dollars in your marketing budget to get in front of a lot of people. You just don't need to do that anymore. So that's why you have these smaller brands that are coming up. And I imagine the market shares of all the guitar companies is kind of all over the place the last few years. You know, people coming in, people going out, people coming up. It's, you know, it's crazy. It's and guitars as well. It's obviously expensive business making them, but you know, the spoils to the victor are massive. Like, I mean, I bet Ibanez is killing it. I'd love to see how much money they make because they make, you know, a guitar at every single price point. They've got a really good roster of artists, very varied. Same with Fender, PRS. You know, we're not talking like Apple money here, but we're talking like, you know. And I think Gibson is just, like I say, 10 years, and it could be over. I think not over, but you know, because things could change on a dime, like you said, with a little bit of finessing how they do stuff and how they market themselves. They can probably turn it around in like 2 years. But it's like I said, if you're bringing in the suits to make these decisions and not actual people who care about it, then, you know, if people, all the people that make the decisions care about is the bottom line and the revenues and the profits, then they're just going to be cutting away stuff and trying to reduce costs, which has an impact on the overall product. They're going to stop innovation because that costs money, stop R&D because that costs money. It becomes a vicious cycle of cost cutting and nonsense, and then eventually it goes bad anyway. So it's better to do what you said, is to restructure the company, make Epiphone, the high-end Epiphone stuff, a Gibson sub-brand of Gibson under the Gibson brand, and do that. I mean, that's so obvious, like the obvious move. And then just see what PRS is doing and just meet them midway and just meet them head on. Go, look, yeah, you're doing that. We're doing this. We're Gibson, you're PRS. Let's go. You know, it seems as simple as that to me, but obviously there's more moving parts than that, but what are you going to do?
Definitely. Yeah, you got to do something to catch up, though, because I think Ibanez could take their place, because, I mean, the top three are, depending on who you ask, Fender, Gibson, and PRS. Yeah. But it could easily be Fender, Ibanez, PRS soon, you know? Yeah. They gotta change, man.
They have. Market's changing. You need to change as well. It's change your denim jeans for some black ones.
But speaking of Epiphone, apparently there's a Dave Grohl model, which has only been a Gibson model forever, and it's based on the Trini Lopez kind of 335 hollow body type guitar. And the Dave Grohl model I've wanted for years, but it was only made by Gibson, and it starts at like $5,500, and then other people end up getting it and throwing it up on the used market for $10,000 or $15,000. So they're impossible to get. So Epiphone's apparently teasing those, and they're probably going to do it like the Adam Jones models, which have been hugely successful, which, by the way, outsold the Gibson Adam Jones models by a huge margin.
What was the difference in price?
Which is kind of crazy.
What was the difference in price?
The difference in price, probably $4,000.
There you go then. I mean, that's a huge...
I mean, the Adam Jones models were $5,900 when they came out, and now you can get the Epiphone ones for $900, $950.
See, if I was dropping that much,
and they all have the artwork.
If I was dropping that much money on something, I'd want it to have an engine in it at least. You know, that's just, or like a super fast CPU or something.
Get you
like
to and for work. Yeah,
it's just too much. It's just way too much. But yeah, I mean, that would be cool. But that's the thing with Epiphone; they can do this kind of stuff, and they seem like a more agile company and less restricted than Gibson. So it would make sense to just use the Gibson brand on those kind of moves and make the Gibson brand a bit more relevant. But yeah, so I think we've been going for a while. So what are we going to be talking about next week? Because it's going to be a weekly thing. So we need to maybe talk about the next week's issues, because we've kind of covered a lot of ground here. And if there is a lot of waffling and stuff, this is our first go at this. So, bear with us. We will get a bit more tighter as we go forwards. Yeah, for next week, what are you thinking?
Well, we did a little bit of talking about that earlier. And I was thinking maybe the difference between recording at home and going to a big studio, as well as record deals.
That would be
a great topic to talk about, because things have completely changed. I mean, today I just really wanted to pick on Gibson, because I just can't believe that they're still in business. But that would be great for next week. Let's talk about that, because we did go into it for a little while there and started talking about it, but the deals that people get are not like the record deals that people think about. That doesn't exist anymore. And so it comes down to, should I do it all by myself and be a one-person team, or a four-person team if you're in a band? Or should you still go after that record deal? And there's pluses and minuses to both. So we can talk about recording next week and
the realities of
dive into that.
Yeah, massive record contracts and what they actually do mean, and whether they're worth it or not.
Because it's changed.
Yeah, well,
I think changed vastly.
Yeah, okay, that would be cool. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And electricjam.com. We'll have links in the description. You can check out all of our different articles. We do reviews on music. We do reviews on gear, guitars, pretty much anything guitar, metal, rock related.
Yeah, and in the coming weeks, we're going to be having Chris is going to be showing off some of his recording and production skills via a course that we're going to be doing. But if you're on the email list, then we send out an email once a week. Obviously, it has links to the podcast in it and stuff like that, covers some of the latest news. But we also have like a video. There's like a focal point of each email where Chris will show you how to do something. And it could be something to do with recording. It could be something to do with setting up an amp. It could be something to do with guitar technique. And it's just basically like one cool thing a week that you can learn. And it's super actionable. And it'll be 3 minutes. You can watch it and you'll be like, oh, I know how to do that now. And it'll be nice and useful. And you can go off and do it and integrate it into your life and hopefully make it all the better for it. And yeah, so that's it for me. And we'll catch you next week.
That's a wrap for today, but check us out on electricjam.com and check back next week for a new podcast where we go over some serious guitar controversy with a very specific brand. And if you're in the know, then you probably know who we're going after. Check back next week. Thanks for listening.
Electric Jam Podcast.